Uh, Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining our webinar on LNG. This webinar, we have an esteemed guest, Stephanie Seals, LNG Fundamentals Manager from Excelerate Energy. This is part of our monthly webinar series where we talk about different topics within the energy industry, going across the energy industry, different sectors of the energy industry. For those that don't know about EnergyGigs, we are a cross-energy platform. We connect energy companies to energy experts over full-time, just-in-time, and temporary freelance projects. And with that, without further ado, I guess.
Everybody, my name's Stephanie Seals. I work for Excelerate Energy. I have been working with Excelerate Energy for the past year and a half, but I have been in the energy industry since 2007. First got started with General Motors doing analysis for global crude oil and natural gas. Then that was when I was in Detroit, and I apologize. I've been having a bad cough all week, so if you hear me coughing, I do apologize for that. So I started with General Motors, and then that was during the Great Recession. Then after that, I moved on to BP because I enjoyed actually being in energy. So my master's degree, backing up a little bit, was in economics, and at that time, I was open to going into any industry. So once I was with General Motors doing energy there, I realized that I actually liked and enjoyed energy. And then I decided that likely moving to Houston to actually be in the energy center of the United States for the most part would be my best next step. Then with BP, I was doing natural gas analysis. And when I say that, I was doing natural gas analysis for North America, mainly the US, but some for Canada and Mexico. Because of my background at BP had also been doing crude oil, my following job incorporated more of the crude oil aspect, and I was with BG Group, who was then acquired by Shell in 2015. But when I was with BG Group, I was also doing global crude oil fundamentals analysis. Now, it was in BG that I actually transitioned from crude oil to LNG. So I was doing crude oil with Shell for about 4 years. And then I moved on to the LNG team, where I continued doing more of LNG analysis. And eventually, and it was new to me in some ways because, yes, I knew of LNG having done natural gas analysis, but it being in the LNG industry full-heartedly in terms of what I was doing day to day, that was new for me at Shell. Then after that, I went on to Excelerate Energy, where I am now, and I manage our LNG fundamentals for the whole company. And what does that mean? And let me back up a little bit. LNG means liquefied natural gas, for those that might not be aware. And what I do is I look at global supply and demand for liquefied natural gas, and that determines a number of factors in terms of prices, the markets that need it, the markets that are supplying it, and my company, Excelerate Energy, we are an infrastructure company. And what that means is because LNG has to be transported via a special type of vessel, which is an LNG carrier, LNGC. It then arrives at the other destination, and it has to be regasified and then put back into a pipeline to meet the demands of that country or market's needs. So what we do is, for countries that do not have onshore regasification, my company provides floating storage regasification units, FSRUs, that align right next to LNGCs. And the LNGC provides the gas to the FSRU. The FSRU regasifies it and puts it in the local pipeline system. The thing about FSRUs is that they are mobile, they're vessels, and they can be moved anywhere around the world in terms of where they are needed. We have a fleet of about 10 FSRUs, of 10 FSRUs, with one more is under construction. The global fleet is about 44, so we own, Excelerate Energy owns about 20% of the global fleet.
That's amazing. I mean, and I read recently that Excelerate Energy just this year had two large commercial agreements. One with Petrobangla, which is the Bangladesh oil energy company, and then another with Petrobras in Brazil. How does that work? Like with the FSRUs being mobile and being able to be, their ships, their vessels in their own right. Like, how does that work with these larger long-term contracts, 10-year plus contracts?
So there's two things. Not only are we an infrastructure company, but we also supply LNG or where needed. And Excelerate has about 60 supply contracts with different suppliers globally. So for instance, we might have a supply with the national gas company of a particular country, which means that we can take supply from that country, put it on LNGC, and then transport it to another market. Our contract with Petrobangla is to provide gas. So it's about 0.85 MTPA to 1 MTPA of supply to Bangladesh every year for 15 years, if I'm not mistaken, our contract is. And just to give you an idea of what that means in terms of the scope of gas, in 2022, global LNG demand was 400 MTPA, which is million tons per annum. So that is what we do with the Bangladeshi contract. We also do have a vessel in Bangladesh, and that vessel is there to regasify LNG. Then in Brazil, we have we contracted with Petrobras, one of our vessels as well, and that vessel will be in Brazil for 10 years. So that's Accelerate Sequoia, and that vessel is going to be just the infrastructure. Brazil is an interesting case because they predominantly use hydropower, rainfall water to power their needs that are used at electricity, gas needs, sorry, not gas needs, but electricity needs. And when it doesn't rain, like happened a couple of years ago, they rely more on natural gas. So Bolivia is one of the exporters of gas to Brazil, and their exports to Brazil have been declining. So what we do as Excelerate, not only do we supply, but we provide security of supply, meaning that we are there for when that country needs to import LNG and regasify it for its system. We are currently, another example of energy security is that we are in Finland. We started that contract at the end of last year and first gas at the beginning of this year. There was an incident in October whereby a pipeline connecting Finland with the rest of the continent of Europe was sabotaged. It now has been determined that it's been sabotaged by a Chinese tanker dragging anchor.
Oh, wow.
Rest of the European continent to receive gas. We have a vessel in Finland. That vessel has been is the only sole provider of LNG to Finland, of gas to Finland. So what I mean by security of supply, if without our vessel, Finland is not a huge gas consumer, but still they do need the gas. We are now the only infrastructure able to provide gas into the country.
Wow. I mean, I think over the last couple of years, what's been obviously the conflict in Ukraine and Russia, and with winter coming, the need for not only Ukraine to have energy, but all of Europe to have energy, because the sort of the way that conflict has created some dynamics, geopolitical dynamics. I mean, how does that factor into like the work that you do in terms of the geopolitical situation with regard to these, these conflicts, and how with your work at Excelerate?
Definitely. So the Finnish example is one perfect example of how we have been supporting the European community in terms of being able to provide our services. They actually signed their contract with us right before, a month before the Russia-Ukraine conflict began. Due to the Russia-Ukraine conflict and Germany, which was the highest importer of pipeline gas from Russia, Germany went ahead and started building import terminals to put FSRUs in those import terminals in order to have security of supply. Excelerate was one of the companies that was able to provide an FSRU, and we are expected to begin operations at the beginning of next year in the port of Wilhelmshaven. So to your point, we were there actively involved in being able to provide infrastructure in order for Germany to have their security of supply as the continent navigates having to deal with no Russian pipeline gas, at least Northern and Western Europe.
Wow. Okay. Well, just to remind everyone on the webinar, like the chat's open. So please, if you have any questions for Stephanie, please do ask them. We'll be monitoring the chat as we go through it. I guess one question that we kind of talked about internally is, in terms of the challenges with regard to infrastructure development for LNG, like what are you seeing are the challenges in terms of building out your fleet, and I mean, are there any challenges unique to the United States or more global in nature?
No, it's global in nature because we depend on shipbuilders in Korea and China, but mainly our shipbuilders have been in Korea. So globally, as I mentioned, there's 40-something FSRU vessels. It takes a long lead time to build these vessels. And not only that, we know that everything has become more expensive and the supply chain issues. So those issues that I think are being felt across many industries is impacting the construction of FSRUs. So what occurs at these shipbuilding yards is you have to book a particular slot because they only have a limited amount of slots to build vessels. You have to book those in advance, so you have to commit very early. At Excelerate, we believe, and also globally, that LNG is a transition fuel and is there to meet the economic needs of emerging markets, or another term used for that, the global south, as they transition to cleaner burning fuels. So for that, a lot of these countries perhaps might not be interested in building onshore infrastructure because that is a big investment and that's going to be there for life. However, with an FSRU, they can potentially import gas via the FSRU, have that there for a set period of time as they transition to renewables, for instance. So it's a flexible solution for not only the global south, but as I mentioned, for energy security for other markets that need it to just assure that they consistently have supply of LNG.
Okay. I mean, with the projects and these contracts being so long, like, is there some seasonality into in your work as the fundamentals manager? I mean, are you forecasting out what it would look like in a couple of years, or what does that involve, like, in terms of your work?
Seasonality, but because of the northern and southern hemisphere cycles, one always has an impact on the other. So for instance, if Europe gets very cold, that means that, and if Europe, let's say, simultaneously gets very cold, but South America gets very warm, or the southern hemisphere gets very warm and they need LNG for cooling purposes versus Europe that needs it for heating purposes, there might be some competition. So
is it fair to say that because your FSRUs are floating in their vessels, like you can take advantage of the spot prices to a certain extent, or is that?
yes and no on the spot prices. On the spot prices, I would say it's more, I mentioned earlier that we do have supplies with certain companies and national energy companies. So, for instance, Bangladesh put out a couple of public tenders throughout the year thus far, and we were able to supply into those tenders, taking advantage of lower spot prices this year than last year.
Yeah.
So that's how we would take advantage of prior to the.
I guess maybe just in terms of like with your contract with Bangladesh, for example, are you is still parked there through the duration of the contract, or they just need to be there when the LNGC arrives? Is that how that works, or? Okay.
Because it needs to be plugged into the natural gas pipeline system, and that's not like a I'm here tomorrow, gone tomorrow. I'm here today, gone tomorrow. It's a midterm to a long-term affair. Take advantage of the seasonality, and we have done that. For instance, the vessel that I mentioned that's about to start in Germany, it's on dry dock right now. Like it's going through repairs right now. Not repairs, sorry, but getting updated to then go and operate in Germany. That was in Argentina during their winter, this past Northern Hemisphere summer. So there are those swaps that could be done in terms of taking advantage of the northern and southern hemisphere varying seasons. So we do that. Wherever possible, we try to optimize our fleet, but most of our fleet right now is fully contracted.
Like I'm hogging the whole conversation. If there are any attendees that want to ask a question, please do ask them. Or Jason Fisher, if you have any questions you wanted to ask, then I don't want to monopolize all the whole time.
Yeah, one of the questions we have is where do you see the opportunities for people to get into the LNG industry, and what sort of education and training is required?
I would say that to get into the energy industry, any background is welcome. And I say that because you don't have to be a technical person. You can be in accounting, in finance, other mid and other mid-office and back office roles where you can get into the energy industry. So you don't have to go, for instance, and become an engineer. Yes, we have engineers in our companies that obviously look after our fleet. But in terms of the LNG industry, I think there's a website called lngjobs.com, or even our website, and see what kind of jobs are available, because I believe in this day and age, if you have, for instance, relevant experience, perhaps not directly in the energy industry, but relevant experience that can be used across different businesses is useful. And like when I was first hired into General Motors, I didn't know anything about energy. I was taught about energy. There's a couple of people within our company that have started, for instance, doing contracts and such. They had no idea about the industry, but they had the expertise to do the day-to-day and meanwhile learn about LNG. So I think there's a lot of options and possibilities, especially with this industry that's growing a lot. The United States is going to begin, it's going to be one of the major gas LNG exporters. They already are, but the United States is going to continue holding that title for years to come. So there's a lot of growth opportunities throughout, and because the industry is growing pretty fast, perhaps the need for talent is probably greater than in other energy industry and other aspects of energy. For instance, in the oil sector, for instance.
So a follow-up on that one is, are there any trade organizations or networking groups or conferences that you would recommend people to attend if they want to get more information on the industry and to network?
Organizations such as yours that put together these events are a good place to start.
What are you seeing in terms of the work, in your day-to-day? Where are you seeing opportunities for freelancers or independent contractors, consultants? I mean, is there a lot of that in the LNG space, or are most people just full-time employees? Like,
I think it's very specialized, right? If we need a study or something, we do, there is freelance work and things along those lines. We're small, so because we probably don't have everything in-house, we would potentially go and hire some type of temporary work. Another thing I failed to mention, for those that are in the construction industry or interested in the construction aspect of the LNG industry, there's, like I mentioned, the United States is growing its LNG exports capability, and a lot of these facilities take 3 years or so to be built. So that's another area of potential opportunities. They are in not the most central places. For instance, in Louisiana, they're in the southern part of Louisiana. In Texas, they're in there's some in Freeport that potentially will look to be expanded. So there's opportunities there from that side in terms of construction and industries or jobs that support that construction aspect of LNG.
That's great. Well, we have a couple minutes left. Just wanted to open it up again to any of the attendees that have any questions. In the meantime, I guess, like, I'm very curious, Stephanie, like, what is a day in the life of Stephanie Seals look like?
It really depends. So one thing that I did not mention is that I am in the commercial team. So that means I am in the team that looks at business potentials for the company. And that means that we're looking at proposals and fundamentals for particular countries. And I also work very closely with the C-suite. So for me, it really varies. It can be anything from reading reports and doing a summary in a country to then looking at a particular side of the industry to determine if the information that we're gathering from other places is true. So it really does vary. And as I said, we are a small company, and which is nice because you do get to do a lot of different things being in a small company. So it really depends. I do put out reports on a weekly basis and share intel as I see fit within the company. And yeah, all the research that I do, if needed, applied to particular projects that we might be looking at.
Well, I think that's, Jason, if you have any additional questions, I think that's pretty much, that kind of wraps up our webinar. But well, Stephanie, really want to thank you very much for being our guest on today's webinar. You are our first guest on LNG, so it's been a very informative. You know, we'll follow up with you to get that information on the trade organizations, and we'll send it out to the attendees. But again, thanks so much for joining, and thank you to the attendees that joined, and wish you a wonderful holiday.
Likewise, thank you so much for having me today and being able to participate in these 30 minutes. I appreciate the work that you guys are doing for the energy industry. Again, please feel free to reach out, and we will be in touch.